There are many masters of Chinese painting, but here's a folk tale about a young boy who had a particular talent. Long, long ago, in the Chinese countryside, there lived a boy named Liang, who was about 8 years old, and his family was very, very poor. So he couldn't afford to go to school because everyone had to pay in those days. No, he had to work a job to help his family have enough money for food and clothing. And he was glad to help, and his job was to go out into the woods every day and gather fallen branches and bundle it for firewood to sell in the village. But Liang had a secret dream. Oh, how he wanted to be able to paint. But his family was so poor, they couldn't afford even a paintbrush. But he would take any opportunity to take a stick while he was in the forest and draw on the ground the things that he saw, the birds, the fishes, the water, the wind in the trees. And when he was by the river, he'd dip his finger into the water, and on the dry stones, he would paint pictures in water as well. One day, he was walking out of the forest with a big bundle of dried sticks on his back, walking by the schoolhouse where the windows were wide open, and he heard the teacher's voice say, "Now, class, today I am going to teach you the proper way to hold a brush, prepare your ink, cut the paper, and paint." Liang put down his bundle and climbed up the tree and crawled out on the branch that hung over the open window. And when he looked in, he saw desk after desk, student after student, sitting in front of piles of beautiful paper and cups full of precious brushes. He leaned so far over that at last the teacher saw him and shouted towards the boy, "You filthy little beggar, trying to steal a lesson. I'll teach you a real lesson." And the teacher pulled up his gown, ran out of the classroom, followed by the screaming, laughing students. They stood at the base of the tree and threw rocks and stones and dirt clods at poor Liang until he came down and ran away as far and fast as he could. That night, Liang lay in his bed on his little cot on the dirt floor. And as he thought about his day, he rubbed his eye and his finger came away a little wet. But he just reached down onto that dirt floor and drew a picture of a pine tree. That night, Liang had a dream. He dreamed he was standing on a curved red bridge in the middle of a green and leafy garden. And as he looked to the east, he saw the rising sun, and out of the light of that sun, he saw a shape come moving towards him, getting larger and larger until he could see that it was a giant phoenix bird, and riding on the back of that bird as if he were astride a horse, an old, old man with long gray hair, long gray mustaches, and a long gray robe. The phoenix and the old man landed silently on the bridge next to Liang. And although Liang could not see the old man's lips move, he could clearly hear him say, "I give you this brush, Liang, and you may use it, but only for the good of the people." Then he took out of the sleeve of his gown a brush and put it into the boy's hand. Have you ever had a dream that was so wonderful that when you woke up out of it, you tried to go back to sleep and re-enter that wonderful feeling? It was the same thing for Liang, but he couldn't get back into his dream either. But when he looked down, lying on his chest was a paintbrush, a real paintbrush. He jumped out of bed and he tucked that safely into his shirt, tied it tight, ran out to the forest, collected a bundle of dried twigs, took it to the village and traded it for an inkstone and paper. And as he walked home, he thought, "I am going to be able to paint my first picture. I know, I'm going to do it. I'll do it for my mother. And what would she like? Oh, I know, she would like to have chickens. She always said she'd like to have chickens so that we could have eggs and she could feed us healthy food. And so the first thing Lang did was paint 3 fat gray and white speckled chickens and a brown rooster with a red comb. He put the last touch on each of the bright black eyes of the chickens and the rooster. And as he did so, he had to sit back because the birds were plumping up right on the page. Soon they were standing on their skinny yellow legs going quack, 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 quack. And his mother ran out saying, "What's going on?" And when she saw the chickens, she was so happy she began to shoo them off to a safe place. And now began the most wonderful time in Lang's young life. Now, he would go into the village on market day and paint pictures, and people would pay him money. But he was always very careful to paint the entire picture except for the very last detail. And so the pictures would stay flat on the page. But his secret was that when he heard someone needed some help, their old neighbors, an old farmer and his wife with no children, had a donkey that died. So Lang painted a picture of a lively gray donkey and a cart with 2 wheels, and when he put the last touch on it, it plumped up off the page, stepped smartly out, and went right over to the neighbor's house. And so in that way, Lang was able to help those in need. Now, at the time that Lang lived, the Emperor of China was a greedy man from a greedy family. And when he heard that good things were happening in the province out where Lang lived, he wanted some of that. So he told his soldiers, "Go out and find out what's happening and bring back some of those goods for me." It was market day, and Lang was just finishing a painting of an egret. And as he put his brush off to the side, a tiny flicker of ink flipped out and landed right where the egret's eye would be. The entire marketplace fell into a hush as they saw first a feathered wing come up, and then a body, and then a leg, and the beak leading its way as it flew off into the sky. And the soldiers that grabbed Lang's arms were silent as the captain said, "Give me that brush, young man. You're coming with me." They threw Lang on the floor in front of the emperor, sitting on his throne. The emperor held the brush and said, "So you are the young man who is doing all of these wonderful things. Well, I want you to paint me a mountain made up of bars of gold." "Your Majesty, I would love to obey you, but I can only use this brush for the good of the people." "You dare to defy me? Then down to the dungeon with you." They dragged Lang off and locked him into the darkest dungeon. The emperor said, "I am the Emperor of China. I know how to do this. Tie back my sleeves." And the emperor began to paint a picture of fat yellow bars of gold. But when he put the last touch on it, the bars began to shape up out of the page as fat yellow snakes, and they began to crawl towards the emperor to come up on his legs and into his lap, and he screamed and ran out of the throne room. The emperor said, "Bring that boy back up out of the dungeon." Lang came blinking up out into the light and saw the emperor leaning back on his throne. "You know, Lang, I am the Emperor of China. I am the leader of all the people. So if you do something good for me, aren't you doing it for the good of the people?" Lang said, "Yes, Your Majesty. What would you like me to paint?" "Well, I would like to have my own ocean. And so Liang painted, and soon, right in front of the palace, sparkled a beautiful, brand new blue ocean. And give me on that ocean, Liang, the largest dragon boat ever seen in the world. I'd like at least 100 white silk sails and a big dragon head at this end and a curling tail at this end. Liang painted that boat. And now, as it sat upon the waters, the emperor and his greedy family and the members of his court all walked onto the dragon boat. Liang, give me a breeze, paint me a little breeze. And so the dragon boat began to scoot along. Wind, I want more wind, Liang, paint me more wind. And so Liang did. He painted clouds larger and larger, thicker and darker, until a great wind rose up and drove that ship right to the bottom of the sea, taking the greedy emperor and his family with it. Now, in the confusion, no one saw that Liang held on to that brush and painted a lively little gray pony. He put the last touch on, jumped on that pony, and rode away. And the new emperor, who was a good, kind emperor, even that emperor could not find Liang. But they would hear stories over the years that there was a young man out in the Chinese countryside who painted beautiful pictures, but he was also always doing things for the good of the people.